Hi, in this lecture, we will discuss critical discourse analysis. What is critical discourse analysis? How to practice it? This lecture will be beneficial for a researcher who has little or no knowledge of critical discourse analysis. This lecture will provide some tools through which a researcher will know how to practice critical discourse analysis. To start with, critical discourse analysis, the word critical has many meanings, and generally negative connotations are associated with the word critical. When someone is not doing well, when economy is down, we use the word critical. But here, the meaning of the word critical is close and careful reading. The word discourse means symbolic human interaction. This interaction can be verbal or non-verbal. And verbal includes both oral communication and written communication. Now, coming to the scope of critical discourse analysis, when the critical discourse analysis deals with linguistic aspect of language, then it is known as critical linguistics or critical linguistic analysis. But when the scope of critical discourse analysis is broad and it deals with social context of discourse, role of discourse in social practices, and function of a specific text, then it is known as critical discourse analysis. And it is interested in how language and discourse are used to achieve social goals. Critical discourse analysis incorporates many methods associated with systemic functional linguistics, anthropology, sociology, ethnography, ethnomethodology, cognitive and social psychology, literary theory, philosophy of language and communication, sociolinguistics, and so on and so forth. We can consider critical discourse analysis as an umbrella, term, where a researcher has a freedom to incorporate various methods. They can use various methods which are associated with culture and specific situation, participant observation, and these methods, they provide theoretical lens to critical discourse analysis, where a researcher can also record and transcribe different languages, different rituals, different traditions, and it provides a great freedom to a researcher to analyze a discourse or a text. Now there are two terms. One is critical discourse analysis and another term is critical discourse studies. Let's look at, is there any difference between these two terms? Van Dyck defines critical discourse analysis as a new cross-discipline that comprises the analysis of text and talk in virtually all disciplines of the humanities and social sciences. So we can see that critical discourse analysis incorporates virtually all disciplines of the humanities and social sciences. Therefore, it is better to call critical discourse analysis as critical discourse studies because it has a broad focus while analyzing a text or a discourse. Now let's see how critical discourse analysis functions. Let's take examples. So critical discourse analysis can analyze a communication between doctor and patient. Critical discourse analysis can analyze persuasive language of advertisement. Critical discourse analysis can analyze a judgment, can analyze the language of a convict. But the main thing for the analyst of critical discourse analysis is to look very carefully what is going on in an event. That is first thing. And the second thing is whether it maintains the existing social structure or is likely to change or revise it. So the bottom line is any discourse, any text, you can analyze through critical discourse analysis, but your focus will be on what is going on in an event and to look at whether the existing social structures are maintained or not. So let's assume a researcher undertakes a text or a discourse. So what is the focus? The focus is the use of language, if it is in a linguistic form or other forms of communication. And if an analyst is a good analyst, then the researcher will look beyond the normalized discourse, or the researcher will make things strange. This is how critical discourse analysis works. We will see what do we mean by looking beyond the normalized discourse, or what do we mean by making things strange. We have one example, the example of marriage ceremony of the Church of England. Marriage ceremony is not a new ceremony. It has been going on for many centuries. And what we observe that there is a difference in oath for man and oath for woman. The marriage promises a man makes and the marriage promises woman makes. So when we compare the promises made by men and women, we find that to obey him and serve him is an additional phrase for woman. Besides, to love the partner, comfort the partner, honor and keep the partner in sickness and in health. Now, someone who is undertaking this text will find that for centuries, people have been following these oaths, these promises without any objection, whether the marriage is a traditional marriage or it is a court marriage. That is to say that the marriage ceremony has been normalized. It is an example of a normalized discourse. But this is not done for an analyst, for a good analyst of critical discourse analysis. A good analyst will see beyond the normalized discourse and will object that why is it only for women to obey the man and serve the man, and why it is not there for the man? Why this clause? Why these phrases are missing in men's promises? So this is how you can look at a text beyond the normalized discourse. This is how you can make things strange. So let's first try to understand what is the concept of discourse and text in critical discourse analysis. As we have seen that discourse is a symbolic human interaction, and both verbal and non-verbal communication falls under discourse. And when it comes to text, then text is a product of discourse. And a text describes a linguistic record of a communicative event. That means discourse is broad, but text is narrow. Text is linguistic, but discourse is both linguistic and beyond linguistic science. At the same time, we have a concept of textuality. What is textuality? The suffix ity has the meaning of quality, quality of being something. That means when we talk about textuality, we are talking about the quality of being a text. Are there certain standards of textuality? So what are those standards that make a text a text? Beaugrand and Dressler, they provide 7 criteria. And that is a necessity for textuality. So if a text has textuality, then the text must have, or text must qualify under these criteria. The first criteria is cohesion. And what is cohesion? The ways the words are connected in sequence. That means we are talking about the meaningfulness. When one word interacts with another word, when another word interacts with another word, then how they are connected in a sequence. And the way they are connected, they must be in perfect cohesion. And once we have this cohesion, and when we read the text, or when we perceive the text, then we can see a coherence. That means the outcome of cohesion and the outcome of the connectedness that we have, that creates a coherence. At the same time, in order to qualify as a text must have acceptability. The form that is used in the text must be appropriate to the cultural setting and the way in which it is received by those taking part. So when we talk about acceptability, we are removing incongruity. So the text is congruous. Then comes intentionality. The text producer's discourse, purpose, goal, or plan must be clear through the text. Then text must be informative. It must be relevant, and it also follows intertextuality. That means the way in which a text relies on previous text for its form and reference. So a text refers to the previous text in terms of its form and in terms of its reference. Beaugrand and Dressler, they gave these criteria, 7 criteria for the standardization of a text, for the qualification of textuality. How can a text maintains textuality? We will see with one example the standards of textuality. This example is taken from Cohesion in English by Halliday and Hassan. Consider the following text. The text goes like this: wash and core 6 apples, put them in a bowl. There are 2 sentences. In the second sentence, them is anaphor and it refers back to its antecedent. And what is the antecedent? Antecedent is 6 apples. Now, them, anaphor, is searching its antecedent, and them in this search crossing the boundary, the sentence boundary, and looking at the antecedent in the previous sentence. So there is a cohesive relation between 6 apples and them, and because of this there is a cohesion across sentence boundary, and because of this cohesion, the overall outcome, the overall effect is creating a coherence. Now we also observe that these 2 sentences are subjectless sentence, and when we know that subjectless sentences are used in imperative form, when we are requesting something, when we are directing someone, and this imperative form is acceptable in English when we are giving directions, when we are making a request, and the intention of the author is clear, that the person is instructing and informing the hearer, the audience. So at the same time, this text is relevant, and where it can be used for a cookery show and follows a pattern used in such shows. And it also qualifies intertextuality, because this is the type of linguistic form we find while giving instruction in a recipe book or in a cookery show. So we have seen that there are only 2 sentences here, but these 2 sentences, they are maintaining all the 7 standards of textuality provided by Beaugrand and Dessler. Now we will see some terminologies which are associated with critical discourse analysis. The term domain. We use this term domain for discourse domain. So what is a domain? Domain is the term for a socially recognized context within which the discourse takes place. We have taken here the example of BBC. So BBC is one such discourse domain where certain things happen. And whatever happened under BBC, that is again socially recognized context. The next term is social practices. People within specific domains engage in social practices. So let's assume that BBC is a domain, and in BBC there are people who are engaged in social practices. And what type of people who are engaged in social practices? They are reporters, news reporters, and what they are actually doing, they are doing news reporting. So we have a genre that is a specific product of a social practice done by news reporters, that is news reporting. So these reporters, these news reporters, they create a discourse community. So not only the reporters, but cameramen, technician, editors, producers, all these people, they create a discourse community in BBC. So people concerned may meet frequently or rarely, or sometimes not at all. So let's say there is a possibility that the editor is not meeting cameraman. There is a possibility that producer is not meeting news reporters, but still they are connected with each other and they create a discourse community. And when they create a discourse community, they develop specific discourses for the audience. The next terminology that is associated with critical discourse analysis is frames. So what is frames? So framing is important in CDA, critical discourse analysis, because the way we view the world carries cultural messages that become normalized and accepted as everyday common sense. So there is certain terminology that creates a frame in our mind, a mental image in our mind. So newsroom creates a frame. Newsroom is a frame. Live, documentary, breaking news, etc. are frames. So when we practice discourse, critical discourse analysis, very frequently we use these terms like discourse, text, domain, genre, social practice, actors, discourse community, frames. So we have seen how these terms are important. We have also seen that how critical discourse analysis functions and how someone can use critical discourse analysis with great freedom because many methods related to humanities and social sciences, they assist it. So we will discuss other such concepts related to language, theories, and linguistics in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.